Hey, what's up, Trailside Church? Pastor Sean here. So excited that you're with us this morning in this new kind of reality that we have in the world today. Hey, I've heard so many cool stories already about gatherings and that you have invited friends and other people around and that you're sharing breakfast with each other. And I just think that's the greatest thing. It's so fun. And man, listen, I want to pray. We're going to get started a little bit different this morning, obviously, as we kind of figure this whole thing out. But let's pray. Let's go there first as we get started this morning. Thanks for being here with us. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much for your goodness and your grace. God, we know that there are trying times, that there's a lot of uncertainty, that there's a lot of things that we can't control, but we know that you are in control always, that you haven't forgotten us, that you haven't allowed us to fail, that you haven't allowed us to falter, and that this whole experience that we're all in together is in your hand, and it lies within who you are and what your plan is for us. And so we're not fearing that, we're not failing that. We know that, God, you're in control. And Lord, we're just excited to see what happens to the church. We know that everything that that man and that Satan intends for evil, that you turn it and make it good, that you are glorified in all things. And so my prayer this morning, Lord, as we come together, even in this new environment, away from our building, away from the walls that would call us church, God, my hope is that you would just infiltrate our hearts and our lives, that we would experience your peace and your joy this morning, even in the midst of that. So thank you for this morning. Thank you for the people who are gathered. Thank you for the opportunity that we have to put this online and to be together in this new way. And I pray that you would be with us as we celebrate the Lord's Supper later on today. We love you. God, we thank you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Hey, church, real quick before I get started and get too advanced, too far through, I want to remind you, in the description below, you're going to find stuff for our kids' church as well. So Trail Kids also is not done meeting. And we're excited because we have put something together to allow you to actually lead your family well. And, we believe that in Deuteronomy, it says that the parents are the first people to disciple their children. And so we wanted to give you that opportunity, which you have. So you'll find all those instructions from Doug and our Trail Kids team in the comments below. I'll also make sure it posts on our page as well for you to have this activity to do, so you can teach your children about Jesus as well and his goodness and his grace. So we are in Psalm 23, verse 4 today. Isn't it interesting that this kind of worked together and that we're still in Psalm 23 in these moments where the world is crazy. It's just absolutely nuts. As you guys know, because you're living it, the coronavirus is creating this mass chaos and fear with people. People are scared of what could be, or what's going to happen, what is already happening. Everything is uncertain. And we have this mentality of fear. And some of that is valuable. Some of that is reality. The Lord put not fear in us, but the ability to understand danger and to make decisions based out of that for our good. And that was put in you so that you wouldn't miss moments where you need to be careful and cautious. And what we've learned in the last few, weeks now, if you can believe it, it was 9 days ago that we had all of our sports normal and we were going out and eating regular dinners together, and the world was moderately the same for us in America here. But what we've realized is that that's not true anymore for us. This coronavirus, this disease, this virus is causing mass chaos and fear. But what I want to encourage you in this morning as we talk for a few minutes, hopefully it'll be a little less than a normal Sunday. We have a God who has defeated death, who has defeated this virus, and he's done it as well, and it's over. In his hand, this has no power over us. And listen, I know this Sunday looks a little different, but I want to encourage you that no matter what happens with this virus over the next few weeks, that the church will continue. The church is not wrapped in four walls. Trailside Church is not something that just happens in a small environment in the middle of TR. What Trailside Church happens outside, everywhere. It happens in our city. It happens in homes. It happens in all kinds of places where you gather with others and meet and talk about Jesus and just live life together. And so I know this might look a little different than a typical Sunday, and it's going to for the next few weeks. But the reality is, we are the church together. We are living together. We are still being the church, even outside of the walls that we call Trailside at 6711 State Park. So, and it's an interesting thing. My kids asked me, I think it was on Thursday of last week. They said, "Hey, what is this whole like? What does the world actually look like? Like when does everything go back? When is normal a thing again?" And I looked at him and I kind of, well, I did that. I scratched my scratched my face and I said, I don't know. I don't know what normal looks like. We've never seen anything like this before, guys, and we've never experienced anything like this before. Everything is new. And that thought actually kind of shook me for a second. Because consider that just for a moment, where you are right now, what you're experiencing right now. Consider that for a moment. Everything is new right now. Nothing is familiar. Nothing is normal. Everything is new. That the way the world operates, the way news is reported, the way that we live lives, the way that we have meetings, the way that we celebrate. I saw a friend of mine who their son had a birthday, and he was just kind of alone at home with their family because that's the reality. I did a wedding this past weekend where there was a bride and a groom and maybe 15 other people, because that's all that could get there, because of what fear has done. And everything in our lives is new like that. If you go shopping at Walmart, you experience people with masks and gloves on. I saw a guy here in Travelers Rest who literally grabbed one little wipe they mean for carts, and he just yanked up and about 25 wipes came out, and then he grabbed on where the bottom was and he yanked again. And I thought, there's no other moment where that would be something you would expect to see, where someone would grab 40 wipes to clean a cart down. But that's the reality. That's the new known. That's our norm, at least for now. Nothing normal, nothing familiar is familiar anymore. And we're all just trying to figure this thing out together. But what I'm learning and what I realized when I told my kids is that there is one thing we can absolutely rely on. It's that God is truly in control. That even in the midst of this, he hasn't forgotten you. He hasn't forgotten us. Psalm 46 says that God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And I want you to think about that for a moment. Like, God is a place of refuge. Like, the psalmist explains that. Ever-present help. He doesn't just, as a lot of us treat him, he doesn't just get put away in a box, and then when life gets hard, we pull the box out from our bed and say, Lord, I need you right now. I need you to show up. I'm sorry I haven't spoken with you lately or met with you lately or sought you lately, but right now and where I am, I need you to come and show up. But that's not what the psalmist says in Psalm 46. He says, God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble and need. Always there. Let's think about that. God is a place of refuge. When you are threatened, when the very core of who and what you are is hurt, is threatened, God is a ever-present place of security. It's an interesting thought. But it's not just when times are hard. It's all the times. And let's ask ourselves, how many of us have felt like a part of us have been threatened this week? Or this past week, or these past 2 weeks? What in your life has felt threatened? I would venture to say almost everything. Almost all of everything we are has been threatened in some capacity. Our health, our family's health, the way we do life, work, the stock market, the government. There's mass hysteria for toilet paper. Did you ever think 3 weeks ago you would be hoping there was toilet paper? But that's the world that we're in right now. So when we think about that, like God is a place of refuge. When I was 11, I think I was 11, 10 and a half, my younger brother, Tim, was hit by a car by a teenage girl in Michigan. And I remember when that happened, it was like life paused and everything was out of control. Like there was panic, there was unknown. Nobody knew what was going to happen. I remember as a young kid, like peering around the corner where my uncles had hidden me, and seeing my brother, my little brother, he was actually Colin's age at this point, my oldest son, lying under a car motionless. And it shook me, because as I like considered what was happening in my 10-and-a-half-year-old mind or 11-year-old mind, it was an SUV, and there was my brother under it, 3/4 of the way under it. And my mom was there with him. And I remember thinking like, okay, there's no control here. There's nothing that I can say definitively that what's happening right now is going to work out. And I remember my uncle came and grabbed me and he said, Sean, everything's going to be all right. And I looked at him and I said, you don't know that. And I just wanted to, like, my brother's under a car, everyone's panicking, my mom's freaking out. And all my uncle said is, hey, everything's going to be okay. And then I remember he prayed. He prayed that we would just trust. And, a few days later, my brother was fine. He was resilient. He's been hit on his head multiple times, so I guess this wasn't that bad of a shot for him. But he was healed. He was fine, and he didn't let that stop him. He's 34 now, and he's actually in insurance. He sells insurance for people for when this happens to them, like when accidents happen. It didn't stop him from walking in parking lots. And even though it's exceedingly rare that something like this would happen, when that happens, when danger comes, when trouble strikes, when we're threatened, it doesn't change the reality of one thing, that we aren't in control. And that sometimes things occur that remind us of that. And that's where we are right now. That jobs are uncertain, that the stock market is crashing and thriving a little bit and then crashing again and bottoming out. And people are losing so much. Coworkers are sick, that family can become sick, that we can't have the normal moments that we used to have anymore. Everything is uncertain. But what my encouragement is this morning is this: I don't want your fear of what would harm you or threaten your health to overcome your healthy fear of who God is. Your healthy fear of the Most High Yahweh, the provider, the caretaker, the creator of everything. And so let's drop back into Psalm 23 real quick. So now remember, up to this point, David has talked about God's guidance and care in this life of ease, this peace and this comfort. And suddenly he falls into these verses that made Coolio famous. If you remember, the mid-90s rapper. I'll save you from that beautiful line that Julio dropped, which is called Gangster's Paradise. But let's read Psalm 23. That's just not important at all right now. And remember, the first 3 verses are about that ease of life, that care that God has for us as a good shepherd. It says this: the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And so we talked about that the last few weeks. And my encouragement to you would be to go back and watch those if you haven't yet. But then we get to verse 4, the longest verse, the whole psalm. And he says this, after those moments of peace, he says, and even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Consider that again. and where we are right now in life. That a few weeks ago we could say those things. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He makes me lie down in green pastures. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I don't need anything. And now where we're at, you have to struggle to go and be able to find hamburger meat and chicken breast to eat proteins. And here the psalmist says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. What's actually happening here, what the psalmist David is writing, is that he's talking about bringing his flock through this very dangerous path. It was the valley between places of green and peace and the next area to go and grow and to walk and to pasture on. And so he talks about this bringing his flock through a dangerous path, these dry stream beds, a place where life used to flow with water and with growth and everything that comes along with streams, now was dry and dead and gone because of this heat, this oppression that came into this valley. And so they would walk through this low valley where stream beds cut through the hills, where the heat would sit on top of them and suffocate. It would draw you far from remembering what it was like in the streams and in the greenery. There's no grass, there's no water. The heat is oppressive. The walk is steep as you walk down in between two hills, but it's a necessary place between the places of peaceful rest and growth. Consider that for a minute. David says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it's a necessary place between growth and peace and your next time of growth or peace. I heard a friend say, in life, you're either going up the mountain and experiencing the mountaintop or coming down the mountain into the valley. It's always one of those three things. It's kind of the rhythm of life and how it goes. And that's where we are right now in this. Not just in life now, but even in what David says in the psalm. He says, listen, there's no grass, there's no water, it's oppressive heat, but it's necessary between the places of peaceful rest and of growth. This is a necessary place, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Even though I'm in this is what God is doing. That I will fear nothing because you are with me. It's really interesting. In fact, David actually uses hyperbole to describe how extreme this place, because it's a real place, this place he is. He uses this kind of Hebrew combination, and together, kind of, it's so funny. Together, when you put these words the way that David did when he wrote it, it actually kind of means the shadowiest of all shadows. I was like, that's such a now thing to say, right? That's how my children describe things. Like, it's the worstest of the worst. And when David actually talks about this place, this shadow of death, he uses it in this way. He says, it's kind of like being in the shadowiest of all shadows. This deep the darkest place you can imagine. He wanted to express how deep the danger and how heavy the threat was that confronted the flock. Like how real it was. And in this moment he says, even though I'm in this place, even though I'm in the shadowiest of shadows, I will not fear anything. Think about that in our context right now. Think about that in where you are, what you've experienced, and what you have probably already built in your mind that you're going to experience over the next 2 weeks. We're going to see death. We're going to see sickness. We're going to see pain. We're going to see hardship. But my encouragement is that we're also going to see joy. We're going to experience growth. Because here's what I've learned. When we have nothing to rely on but the Lord, when all of our control and all of our power is gone, and we have nothing to rely on but who Jesus is and what he says, he shows up, and it's this incredibly beautiful truth as we learn what God's provision means. Not just in things that we consume, not just in money, not just in status or community, but as we actually experience what it is God gives us, what his provision is for us. It grows our trust and our joy in who he is. And that's why David writes, he said, I will fear no evil. And despite this oppressive and threatening setting, he's unafraid. And he's not unafraid because he's strong or because he has the right weapons or because he has... the reason he is unafraid is because he fears God, and he recognizes that if he fears God, he needs to not fear anything else. Even though these rugged circumstances offer every reason for him to fear, every threat, everything that would hurt, everything that could get in the way, David says, because of this, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. In fact, it's the same remote location, which is down from Jerusalem on the way to Jericho, that the Good Samaritan story that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with happens. It's in Luke 10, and Jesus shares this to talk about the Good Samaritan who saves the life of a man who's been robbed and left for dead by thieves. And this is where David is with his flock. He has a very real reason for fear. Bad people are there. People want to hurt. People want to harm him. People want to destroy him. There are horrible things. There's no place to hide. There's no shelter. It's oppressive in heat. You feel like you are just absolutely falling apart inside out. And David says, in this moment, in the shadowiest of shadows, in the darkest depths of fear, because I know the Lord, I'll fear nothing. To have that heart. Because the psalmist's very real reasons for fear fade. And they fade not because he is in the presence of the shadows, but because he is in the presence of the Yahweh, the Good Shepherd, because he is in the presence of God. See, there are opportunities for murderers and thieves and death of himself and his flock. There are multiple chances to fall and to become hurt and to experience hardship. But David writes, I will fear no evil, because he recognizes that what does control him is not him at all. So he says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And he says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. See, the rod and the staff vanquish fear before the flock, because walking with the shepherd was secure, was safe. Isn't that a beautiful thought? That the shepherd keeps things with him in order so that as you walk with him, you will walk in security and safety, and that nothing will come against you. Here's the truth. It doesn't mean wolves aren't present. It doesn't mean that the walk is easy. It doesn't mean that you have everything you need. It doesn't mean that thieves will not try to overcome you. That's not at all what David says. What David says is, even as I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death, I do not have to fear all of those things, because you are with me. And I'm brought comfort by what you have with you, the rod and the staff. So we dive in. What is the rod? The rod was typically, with shepherds, a short mace-like implement. If you can imagine, just like a stick that you can grab hold of with a huge kind of hard rock on the end. You can just hit stuff over the head with. And it was literally for clubbing anything that would harm the sheep, whether it was another animal or people or whatever it might be. But it was used as to be able to pull off the belt and swing at something and knock something over the head and kill it or hurt it and scare it, so it would leave the people away, leave the flock. It would leave the flock unharmed, and it would lead the people, the threat, away from the flock. But the other picture that David paints here is actually really beautiful as well. The rod of protection is like a scepter in a high court. And it's meant to visibly demonstrate this authority, this power that someone has. And so as you would walk into the throne room of the king, he would extend the scepter out to you as a way of saying, yes, come, you're safe. Like, I am exactly who I say I am, and you are present and allowed to be in my company. Isn't that the goodness of the Good Shepherd? That he does the same. That in moments of fear and death, that he actually extends his scepter out and he says, yes, you are with me. And that's what David says here. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. Because the staff is much like you're used to seeing with the crooked end, and the shepherds would walk with this walking stick, and they would just tap the sheep, keep them on the path. Or if necessary, if they got really off track, hook them and yank them back on the pathway. But they would tap them and kind of lead them down the path and keep them straight. And like a little tap over here and a little tap over there. And they would walk them along these paths of safety and security, that even though danger was everywhere else, that they could just tap the flock here and tap the flock here and keep them in. And as long as they were with the shepherd, he kept them safe. And he kept them secure and tapped them and tapped them and tapped them, that they would walk precisely where they were supposed to, in a place of comfort and peace. Isn't that good news right now? That with both of these tools, that we have comfort, that God uses them to protect us. This is why he's the Good Shepherd. Church, no matter how we meet, no matter what we're going through, no matter what disease or something would strike fear into you or attempt to, you walk with the Good Shepherd. And he does not leave you. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. God protects his people. It's so interesting that we planned this series so long ago, and that it would fall in the midst of this, because this is the truth of what we need to hear and experience, is that even though we are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, we shall fear no evil, because we walk with the Good Shepherd. His rod and his staff comfort us. So church, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you a couple questions. I'll actually put them along the bottom of the screen right here for you. And when you see them, I want you to pause this, because yes, you can pause this video. That's how it works. It's pretty fantastic. And I want you to discuss these with your micro church group, whether it's full of people or just you and your family, or if it's just you, I want you to actually sit and think about these things. But if you have an opportunity to discuss, I want you to discuss these few questions. And then after that, we're actually going to wrap with a live moment of experiencing the Lord's Supper together. So as you pause this video, go grab whatever you might need for communion together, as we experience that together in a few minutes. And listen, you don't have to have grape juice or wine and bread. If you have Ritz crackers or saltines and water, whatever it is, we're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper together. And so I want to ask you to grab those as well as you get ready and pause this video. But here are the questions that I want to wrap up with, that I want you to talk through with your group today. First is this: how does this view of God as the Good Shepherd shift how you view him in this moment? How does this knowledge of who God is shift how you view him, how you view this moment even? Number two, have you ever felt like you're in the valley of the shadow of death? Just honestly. Have you ever felt like you were in the valley of the shadowiest of shadows? And what was that experience like? But on the back end, how did God pull you out? Remind yourself and remind those people around you of the fact that he has brought you here, which means he brought you out of that. And if he's done that once, he'll do it again. And if you're in that valley right now, know that if God has already brought you out of that before, if you exist now and you've fought through all of those things with him, that you'll make it out again, that he has hope. That he is hope, that he lives hope, that he is the experience of hope. And that as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you shall fear no evil, for he is with you. His rod and his staff, they comfort you. And then the last thing I want you to do, I want you to celebrate something. What is great in your life right now? What is good? What have you gotten to experience this last week and a half that has been just a delight to your soul? And share that with your group as well. So pause the video. We're going to come back and pray, and then we'll celebrate the Lord's Supper together. Church, I love you. We're going to fight through this. We're going to meet together. We're going to figure out this way to do that. Watch our social media. We're going to have a virtual hangout for our entire church for a few minutes, I think sometime this week. I'll let you know more about that. But in all things, we are together. And we, although we'll walk through the valley of the shadow of death together, we shall fear no evil, for he is with us. Pause the video. We'll see you soon.